Carr, and our guests tonight, Rob Duvall, community activist and IT professional. Good to have you back again, Rob.
Thank you very much.
And our special guest is Ted Chudleigh, the Member of Parliament, Provincial Parliament for Halton.
Thank you, Mark.
Pleased to be here. Nice to have you here. I haven't
Always
seen you
good.
in a while.
Yes.
Haven't seen you. You guys have been busy downtown, haven't you?
It's the fall session is always a busy time, and this has been no exception.
Yeah.
There's lots of things going on, such as gas plants and fall economic statements.
And Metrolinx and all of those good
Orange
things.
is still hanging on. And,
yeah.
eHealth is crossing the $2 billion mark, so we'll see.
Let's get into
It's been a busy time.
Let's get into some of those issues. I just want to remind our viewers that we'd like to hear from you as well. And so if you can get on your phone, hashtag the issue. Let us know what you think. If you've got any questions for the Member of Provincial Parliament or for Rob, just let us know and get on and start tweeting. You mentioned the gas plant. You know, recently it's come off the front pages, only to be replaced by the Senate, but it's still a burning issue in Ontario.
It's a burning issue. We still don't know who knew what and when, and those are the critical questions. Those are the questions we've been digging for almost 2 years now. It's ironic if not mildly hilarious, that now the government wants to have a panel, the 36th panel that they've created, and this latest panel is to look at a way to have open and transparent government. Well, for the last 2 years, we've been digging for the information. They've released 160,000 pages of information to us, and we still didn't know the answer. It took the Auditor General to find the answer as to what it cost. We now know pretty much what it cost. The Auditor General reported that some of the costs are in the future, and we don't know exactly what those costs will be. It could be much higher than the $1.1 billion. I think on this program or on your former program about a year and a half ago, I said the cost would be about $1 billion.
You did. I recall that, and
I wanted to apologize because I was $100 million out. But
well,
it was.
I'll tell you, and it's interesting at that point when Ted did bring it up, I really said, you know, Mr. Chudleigh, please.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would ever get up in that range. But
well, it was a terrible decision by the government that was made for political purposes. That's a third world type of activity that should never be allowed to happen in a democratic Ontario. Nothing of that scale has ever happened before, where you spend $1 billion and you get nothing in return. You don't get a power plant, you don't get a volt of electricity, you get nothing. You saved perhaps 2 seats in the 2011 election. Interesting comparison. People, you know, it's hard to visualize what $1 billion is, but it's an interesting comparison that.
Well, Rob can tell you because that's what he takes home every
he's a
year.
businessman.
I only wish I could take that kind of money home, but
he may have some better understanding of it, but I don't know what $1 billion is. But I know that Barack Obama, to become president of the United States, had to raise from the American people about $900 million, and that was his campaign expense to become president of the United States, the most powerful politician in the world. In Ontario, $1 billion got 2 out of 107 seats in Ontario. You know, that's the kind of comparison that I think should really upset people about what's happening to their tax dollars when they send them in good faith to the Ontario government. It's never happened before, and if this government is trying to distance itself from that event by stalling, by not calling an election, by not bringing forward a motion of non-confidence, which is sitting on the books, waiting for them to come to the floor of the House, I doubt if they'll ever call it, because they would be defeated on it, and that would cause an election. And I think most Ontarians who are fiscally responsible want an election in Ontario today to get rid of this government and put either the NDP or ourselves in. I'll always let the electorate choose as to what they do, but to make that decision and to go forward with a government that has some economic responsibility to the people of Ontario.
Is that your sense, Rob, in getting around the community and talking to people? Is that they're that upset?
I think
because
this-
it isn't my opinion. I think
This time they are. And it doesn't matter what stripe of government that you look at, everybody seems to be equally as disappointed. And the one thing to remember is when you get that many people that are upset about an issue that affects them directly, and let me give you an example of this. And as Ted said, I'm an entrepreneur. Ted has a very successful company as well in the family, and I'll tell you, we work endless hours. So every dollar that we give, and we write checks for the government, and there are many, many more than I would like to pay, but I gladly pay them. But the government is entrusted with that awesome power to make sure that that money is spent correctly. That's, I think, all anyone really asks, is that healthcare and education and people that truly need help, that can't help themselves, are truly covered. Yeah. And that comes at a cost. But to waste $1 billion actually is far worse than $1 billion, because that is $1 billion gone. There was nothing gained out of it. There's no tax revenue that comes out of that. It would be one thing if they said, we spent this money, it was a cost overrun, we spent way more than we expected, but this is a company that ended up gaining from it, and they're paying their taxes. There's money coming back into the trough. But in this particular case, the $1 billion out probably is more like a $2 billion hit, because they're not going to get any revenue from that. That is gone money. It is money that we have spent interest-free to them, but to us, we pay dearly for it. In the community, I know Carol, my wife, works endless hours doing charity work, and we raised $5,000 for the Milton District Hospital just to get a few pieces of equipment into that hospital. And we put in probably about 3 weeks of work, along with a bunch of other people in the community. And Milton Business Connections did that. These are other business people that are like-minded in Milton that raised that money. Imagine what $1 billion could do. It's absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, MRIs are millions of dollars. We could have probably had about 500 of them for the amount that they wasted on that one thing. And that, I think, is something that really upsets everybody. What's striking a chord is that is hard money in a recession, I might add, where everybody is hurting and their incomes have gone down over the last 5 to 10 years, not like it used to be. I think everyone's really starting to take notice. And some of the arrogance that is going on lately is absolutely alarming.
Speaking about arrogance, Mr. Duncan was in at the committee meeting today. Now, I didn't see all of it, but apparently there were some sparks flying.
Yes, he was not forthcoming with a lot of information. He was there. He was the Minister of Finance at the time when the gas plants were canceled. He was Minister of Finance at the time when the gas plants were sited there. So he had a long experience with those, and he was not very forthcoming with information. And I think he called the committee a kangaroo court. I think he called the committee some other names. I think he was less than polite to Mr. Tabbins, who was a member of the legislature for the NDP party. I've heard the word arrogant associated with his interview, and that's too bad, because he could have brought something to the table, and he didn't. I'm convinced that any government that has an issue like this, whether it be the federal government and the Senate debacle, or whether it be the power plants, the gas plants, or whether it be Orange, or whether it be eHealth, or whether it be Niagara, the hospitals in Niagara, or any of the other scandals that have come to this government, the way to get a scandal behind you is to open the books, do a mea culpa, get all the information out.
Take your hit. Say
sorry, take your hit. Be serious and sincere about the sorry. And, I know that the Liberals are sorry about this, and they would like it to go away. They just don't seem to have the handle on how to make it get on to the next step. We still don't know who knew what and when. And did they know that they were paying 14% interest on money borrowed to build the Eastern plant in Mississauga at a time when they could borrow it for 3 or 4%. Did they know? Who knew that, and when did they know that?
The whole thing seemed to be rushed, didn't it?
Well, it was during an election.
Rushed into it and rushed out of it.
The Oakville
as
plant
well.
was during an election, and they will do anything to win a seat. And it's half a billion dollars per seat makes for a very, very expensive election.
that's
So
that's
it's,
more than it cost in the U.S.
I just think that they don't have the other scandals that they have. The power plants are unique in that is their scandal. It sits on their lap. If you look at Orange, if you look at
and
eHealth,
that's the air ambulance system.
the air ambulance system, if you look at all those other scandals that they've been involved with, it's arm's length organizations that have been the purveyor of the scandal, and they haven't had good oversight of those organizations, and that has caused, when people have access to government money, they don't have the same respect for it that they would have. Rob would have excellent oversight on anyone he hires to do a job for him. When the government hires someone to do a job for them, they don't have that oversight, and money has a different connotation when it's government money. We should not call it government money. We should call it tax dollars money or people's money.
Right.
Because it doesn't belong to the government. It belongs to the people of Ontario. And,
That's a very good point. But when we get back to the gas plants, the only thing that I've heard from Kathleen Wynne and the crew down at Queen's Park is that all three parties during the election would have canceled the gas plants. Would that not have put your party, if you had become government, or the NDP, had they become government, in the same situation?
First of all, about half the cost of canceling the Oakville plant was incurred because they had to do it before the election. We would have done it after the election. We would have done it at much less cost, much, half
when you had
or a
some
quarter,
time to
when we
look
had
at
some
it.
time. In fact, with the Oakville plant, there may have been no cost because there was a clause in the contract which, if you let it run out over about 6 months, the contract died. So we may have got away with Oakville with no costs. Not so with the Mississauga plant. There would have been costs associated with the Mississauga. I think the key to that is that, yes, we would have canceled it, but the key is we never would have built it in the first place. Our government has always had a policy of building government infrastructure in willing host communities. And there was lots of willing host communities. Nanticoke was begging for the plant. And even when they canceled the plant and moved it, they still didn't move it to Nanticoke, which has a huge coal-fired plant, which is being shut down. Probably this will be
Throwing a lot of those people out.
So this would
work.
have replaced that facility, and it would have been good for that community, and it would have been a willing host community. Oakville, it's a terrible site, located in a very busy area.
It's on the Ford plant.
It's on the Ford plant property. It's next to schools, residences, seniors' homes, next to the QEW way.
Doesn't Rob Burton take some responsibility for siting homes and facilities so close to the?
In fairness to Rob, he was opposed to the plant from the beginning. So, in fairness to him.
Okay, but an industrial site would seem like an appropriate site for something like a gas plant.
It's a third bigger than the plant that's located on the 401 in Trafalgar, roughly, and it's a third bigger than that plant, and it's on I think 7 acres of land. That plant uses about 20 acres, so it would have been shoehorned into that facility for that land base. It was badly sited.
I don't hear anything negative about the plant at Trafalgar and 401.
No, it's. I had a tour of it the other day, and the noise of the 401 is much higher than the noise of the plant, even when it's running. So it's a great location. I'm not sure I want to be a neighbor next door, but there's very few complaints concerning the plant.
Okay, we've got a Twitter question, and Chris, can you put it up? Ontario seems to be the check and balance of Canada. Oh, does the federal Liberal Party, surging in the polls, benefit from the Ontario PCs? From Rob.
Interesting question.
Gentlemen, go at it.
In the last post-Second World War era,
Yeah.
I think there's been 4.5 years when the Conservatives have been in power in both Ontario and Ottawa. Other than that, there's been one party in power in Ottawa and one party in power in Ontario, or vice versa.
As Rob says, a check and a balance.
A check and a balance. So there just doesn't seem to be, the public wants the opposition to be in power in Ontario, and I think that's because they want someone to fight for Ontario. That's the only explanation I've ever been able to come up with, is that they want, if the Conservatives in Ottawa and the Conservatives in Ontario, who's going to fight for Ontario? You've got to be seen to be able to fight for Ontario.
Is that your take on it too, Rob?
It is. The problem that we seem to have lately is with the minority governments that we're having, there's no real decision. There's no real push for saying this is the decision we've made and we're going to move on with it and have proper debate. It's important to have proper debate, but when you have a minority government, quite often a lot of things get stalemated. We have everybody bickering with each other. We have one side saying, well, we'll support you on this, and then when it comes time to do the right thing, like recently, they're nowhere to be found. That needs to change, and I think people are probably getting a little tired of it. Most of the people that I'm talking to are seriously considering their other options when they haven't in the past. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing, because it's sparking debate, it's sparking a lot of controversy. Mm-hmm. People are really starting to take a serious look and actually wanting to come out to a lot of the candidates' breakfasts. I know I've been to a few, and the numbers are getting a little bigger. That's the first, I'm sure you know this, but I'm noticing that there's a lot more pointed questions on what are you going to do if you get into power. There's a lot of that going on.
Are you finding that?
Yes, very much so. Mm-hmm. It's I think both the NDP and ourselves are looked on as a government in waiting, and I would think that the Conservative Party would outpoll the NDP in that area as being a government in waiting. Mm-hmm. I think that puts us in a good position. I think the Liberal surge, when there's a new leader for any party, there's a bit of a surge.
I would assume you would want a Liberal in Ottawa, which would virtually guarantee a Conservative government.
We've had such
Ontario.
Good government federally out of this government. Jim Flaherty has been an absolutely excellent minister.
Well, you worked with Jim for a number of years.
Worked with him in the House. He's been an absolutely wonderful Minister of Finance. Took us through the last recession. We were the only country in the world that kind of had a little bump in the road, but our recession has been much lighter than anywhere else in the world. Our banking system has been shown to be one of the strongest in the world. We're coming out of this recession in a much stronger position than any other country in the G20. The federal government has done a marvelous job after the excesses of the Liberal governments over the past number of years in Ottawa. I think that they've done a great job, and I think that continuing with a firm hand on the wheel would be a very good thing for Canada.
Well,
I think we'd have to earn our government on our own merits, with our own policies, with our own programs, and we'd earn that on our own merits, as opposed to winning it because there happens to be a Liberal government in Ottawa.
Well, let me take you up on talking about the federal government a little bit, and let's get into the European free trade and the benefits that it's going to be for Ontario. And we'd like our viewers to participate, throw in on this issue, and hashtag the issue. Get on your phones, tweet it out to us, and we'll get it on the air. The European I remember the first free trade debate, and you were involved in that, Ted. This one is much, much, much bigger.
It's bigger in the sense that it deals with more countries, and
28.
Those countries have a larger GDP combined than the United States does. Of course, 78, 76% of our trade goes to the United States. So in dollars, in the sense of dollars traded, it's not as big as the North American Free Trade Agreement. But in the number of countries that it deals with and the pool of money that's involved, it's much bigger than the Free Trade Agreement. I don't think it'll have the same effect that the Free Trade Agreement had on Ontario. But it will have an effect, and it'll be a very positive effect. It'll be a boon. It'll be a boon to Canada. Well, of course, it begs the question: where will that boon come from? Who will benefit? Who will lose?
Winners and losers.
Winners and losers. On average, we're going to do okay, which means somebody's going to lose, and somebody's going to win. But it's, I think, in this case, it can be a win-win situation. There is some concern in the dairy industry that the cheese market, specialty cheese market, is opening up, and that about 50% of the specialty cheese market will be Europeans will be allowed to come in and supply up to 50% of that market, and that's a concern.
And that's a supported industry. The way I understand
it's a marketing board industry that controls the overall production, and therefore controls the overall availability as well. So we don't have any waste. We don't have any surpluses. It's a managed market, and it's been a good thing for the Ontario dairy industry. I'm not sure we would have a dairy industry if we didn't have a marketing board. I think we'd be dominated by American products. And quite frankly, I like our cheese a lot better than I like American cheese.
It's much better.
However,
Canada.
Yeah,
one of the things that happened in 1989 when the original free trade agreement came into the United States is that our wine industry was supposed to disappear. They were paid off. The people who were growing grapes were given, I think it was something like $7,000 an acre. I think it was a hugely expensive compensation because they were supposed to be wiped out. And unfortunately,
quite the reverse.
Well, no one asked the grape growers, and no one asked the wineries, and they said, no, we're not going to get wiped out. And all of a sudden, they started being able to grow vinifera grapes. There was never an incentive before to grow them. Now there was, and the farmers, I'd put our farmers in Canada and Ontario up against any farmers in the world, and they began to grow vinifera grapes, which up until that time had been a very minor part of our market. They are now 95% of our production, and those are the ones that make wine in Europe and around the world, the viniferous varieties of them. And the wineries anteed up and made investments and started producing the kinds of wines that people wanted to buy. And I think Ontario wines are, especially our whites, are some of the finest in the world.
Some of the best in the world.
We don't quite have the day length to the heat units and the summer heat to produce the Cabernet Sauvignon wines. There's some Pinot Noirs and some Pinot Francs, Cabernet Franc that do very well, but they grow in a shorter season. So
well, you think he knew something about wines, about wines. Now, Rob, how is this European free trade going to affect your industry, for example? Is it going to be the boon, or is it going to be the bust?
We're not going to. We deal a lot in our business with the U.S. Most of high-tech companies, Cisco, Microsoft, those type of things, are U.S. based. However, what we find is a lot of our software is overseas. There's a lot of European software that's designed to run our daily things. So that's going to help. The issue is really a two-legged stool does not stand well. And when you put all your eggs in one basket and something happens like the US in a major recession, and just recently with Congress not coming back and there was a real ripple effect there, you started to see the stocks go down once again before they got their act together at the final 0 hour. It started to come back up, but their economy is still very shaky. I have a lot of friends that I deal with in the States only because of the nature of our business, and a tremendous amount of them have lost their jobs. And Canada has a much better social safety net compared to any U.S. employer. So we should be thankful for that.
But this is going
I
to
think
give
it's
you
gonna be better.
going to give you access to 500 million more people
It will.
on an equal footing. That's got to be positive for you.
Oh, it is. I think what we're going to see is the other people and places that we deal with, they deal sometimes more closely with, you know, Italy and Germany and those type of places. They're going to buy more products from us because they in turn sell to them directly. It's not going to be a bad thing at all. I think what we're going to see is it slowly rise over time as, you know, the European Union get their situation under control, because now they have our great Canadian banker. I think we're going to see.
They're taking everything.
Yeah, well, it's actually the British that have that in the feather of their cap. But I think what we're going to see is things are going to change over time over there. I think their economy is going to increase like it normally does. The U.S. economy will increase, but now when something goes down, all your eggs aren't in one basket, and you're not going to be put into the situation where you're dealing with one large country, and that's all where, you know, where your money goes.
Tremendous strength.
It really is.
I mentioned earlier, 76% of exports go to the United States, and that's a boon. It's a wonderful thing to have. You're marketing into the richest country in the world,
Right.
with the highest spending per capita in the world, but your eggs are in one basket, as Rob says, and that is a concern. And it's the concern. One of the concerns I have with the European deal, the CETA deal, is you can have a free trade deal, but you can have little hiccups that prevent your product from getting into market. We still have problems sometimes shipping fresh
Softwood lumber.
Well, no, I'm thinking of fresh produce,
okay.
fresh strawberries, especially stuff with short lifespan that have to move and quickly. And we still have trouble at the border with inspections, and it takes 2 days. And of course, if you're shipping strawberries over and they're held 2 days at the border, they may not be in pristine condition when they get to where they're supposed to go. So it's by and large, if you're in that line for that holdup, you turn around and come home and look for another market quickly for your product. So there are ways to prevent it, and of course, Europe has always had little problems with things at the border getting them across.
Even Microsoft had the same problem. They have software that is specifically designed for the European Union. So when they install, let's say Windows 7 or Windows 8, Internet Explorer is part of that. It is not in the European Union. It's actually missing from their OS. They have to opt in for it. You have to say, I want this and I don't want that. They don't allow that type. So they actually have to program their operating system slightly different. In order to sell into that market. You're basically following the law of the land, which is understandable. I mean, Canada, I'm sure, does it in reverse on many fronts as well. But just free trade isn't completely free access.
Yes,
that's really
true.
What that is. There's a line in the sand, really, that's drawn there, and you learn that very quickly owning a business.
I think the bottom line on the CETA deal is on the European free trade deal is that go at it as hard as we can to take as big advantage of it as we can. But be cautious when you're doing it.
But for a country that's the size of Canada, we now have two free trade deals with two of the biggest economic drivers in the world.
And working on the Pacific Rim as well.
And working on that, and also down in Brazil, down in South America. Why would the European Union want to get involved with us? I mean, we're basically a very small component of their overall business that they do.
We have huge supplies of raw product, and the world wants those commodities.
But we're selling it at discounted prices now.
Not all of them. No,
well,
I don't think there's much discounting going on.
Except the barrels of oil over into the U.S. are
That's
discounted.
true, but we also have a highly educated labor force. So the quality of the products that we set out compared to China is a big difference. When we're dealing with things in our business that require a huge amount of uptime and never to be down, trust me, they do look at price, yes, but that is really secondary to the quality of the product. If they can have a great North American product, whether that be Canada or the US, they will look at those things first, even if the price value is higher. there is a cost to having poor quality product. And the great thing about is same thing with vehicles. You know, if you take a look at vehicles over in Europe, the first thing you think of is quality. You just do. And the reason for that is because they produce a product that is of good quality. But Canada has many of those caveats, absolutely many of them.
Well, the deal, the free trade deal with the